through the introductions and welcome, and why don't we go this way around. I'm Alan Zelenko with the City of Eugene, and my last 10 minutes as chair.
I'm Lucy Venice, new mayor of the City of Eugene, so this is my first time here.
John Reese, old city manager.
Lynn Taylor, minutes recorder.
Gary Wiley, Lane Transit District, and welcome.
Thank you.
Roy Jackson, Lane Transit District.
Randy Brindle, Oregon Department of Transportation. Good, welcome.
Bill Johnston.
Brenda Wilson, Lane Council of Governments, and welcome to our new MPC members.
Pedro Sheets, I'm the city administrator of the city of Coburg.
Patty Giannoni, City of Coburg, and this is my first meeting as well.
Jim Elsey, I'm the Public Works Director for Lane County.
Sid Lykin, Lane County Board of Commissioners. Pat Farr, Board of County Commissioners.
Gina Grimaldi, City of Springfield.
Hillary Wiley, City of Springfield Counselor, and I'm returning after a slight break. I have spent quite a few years here before.
Christine Lundberg, Mayor of Springfield.
All right, let's do the audience. Tom, you want to start?
Sure. Tom Schwartz, Lane Transit District.
Kelly Hale, Lane Transit District.
Bob Zako, Best.
Emma Newman, City of Springfield. Ellen Courier, Elcog.
Jeff Kernan, City of Coburg. David Reeser, Lane County Public Works.
Kelly Clark, Elcog. Caroline Riley, River Road.
Howard Schuessler, Belchog.
Rob Interfeld, City of Eugene.
All right, good, thank you.
Oh, and I'm Gary Gillespie from the Fighting 5th District of LTD.
Well, welcome to Lucy, Patty, and Hillary to MPC. So when we do items, agenda items, maybe the staff could do a little bit background and up to speed the folks that haven't been here until now. With that, I will entertain a motion for approval of December 1st meeting minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any additions, corrections, deletions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Carries. There are no adjustments to the agenda. Any announcements from MPC members? Okay, with that, we'll do comments from the audience. And we have two, Carlene Riley and Rob Zako, who come up and speak into the microphone.
Public hearing or for the general?
Oh, this is a public hearing. There's no public comment?
No.
Okay. Anybody from the audience want to speak about public comment? Okay, just public hearing. Thank you. With that, we'll go to item number 6, election of chair and vice chair and appointment of OMPOC members. I'll entertain motion for chair of MPC.
Mr. Chair, I nominate Christine Lundberg, Mayor of Springfield, Chair of MPC.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any other nominations? Gone. All those in favor of Christine as chair, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, carries. And then I'll just finish off this agenda. Good.
Yes.
I'll entertain motions for vice chair for 2017.
Mr. Former Chair.
Yes, Mr. Former Vice Chair.
Commissioner Sid Lykin for Vice Chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other nominations?
That was too quick, I just want you to know.
Gone. All those in favor of Sid being vice chair, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, I'll entertain a motion for OMPOC members. We only have one, right?
No.
Two. One board member and a staff member?
And
Two board members.
Two board members.
members.
Oh, okay.
Former chair,
Me.
Gary.
Oh, okay. So I'll entertain a motion, a plank, if you will, for OMPOC members. Pat?
Mr. Chair, I move, you want a plank?
Sure.
Okay. I move to nominate Christine Lundberg and Gary Gillespie on board members.
All right, you both willing to serve?
Yeah.
yes.
Great.
Second.
I'm still the chair.
That's right. Any other nominations? Gone. All those in favor of Gary and Christine as ONPOC members, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And I will turn over the meeting number 7 issues, and here's the public hearing sign-up sheet.
I know. I won by 97%.
Okay, so 7, 8, well, first, thank you so much, and yes, I'm happy to serve as the MPC chair. Maybe not as OMPOC chair, though, here. We keep pushing the meeting back, so.
At the next meeting, the elections will take place, and I'll leave that up to you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, so, but first is our draft Central Lane MPO Transportation Safety Action Plan. So,
Yeah, so today we're going to hold a public hearing on the safety plan, and I've come to you guys a couple of times to present on various parts of the plan, but I'll give a brief overview for some of our new members. This was a collaborative effort with Lane County we've been working on over the past year to develop a set of goals and actions that will help us reduce fatal and severe crashes in our region. And so this draft safety plan that is in front of you has details about strategies that the MPO will be taking to reduce fatal and severe injuries. We received funding through ODOT to hire a coordinator. So the bulk of those strategies will be implemented through the Safe Communities Coordinator position that we hope to start in the next month or so. And that position will be shared jointly with Lane County as the planning process was. So half of that person's time will be working on MPO-specific issues, and a quarter to half of their time will be working on Lane County issues. And for the first year, they'll be really focusing on driving under the influence and speed, because that's one of the major contributions to fatal and severe crashes in our area. I don't know if anybody had any specific questions about any of the materials that they found in the draft plan. I'm happy to answer questions about that.
any questions about it? No? Did you have more presentation? Okay. Well, then, I'm going to open the public hearing. There's 2 people signed up, Charlene Riley and Rob Zako. Charlene first.
Good morning.
Good morning.
But you'd never hear from me, didn't you? I'm Carlene Riley. I live at 395 Marion Lane, Eugene 97404. Safety first. It's been a long time coming. Traffic speed on River Road was the first issue I encountered at my first River Road Community Organization meeting 15 years ago. It was unsafe for dog and man, woman, and child. A friend called me from time to time over the past few years in tears because she had nearly gotten killed more than once as she attempted to cross River Road. She is mentally and physically impaired, making it more difficult for her to cross the road. But crossing River Road could easily be as difficult for a mother with a stroller. In one incident, a car slowed down for my friend, but a second car rammed the car that was in front. My friend ran over and hid in the bushes because she thought she had caused the accident. A neighbor was watching the whole thing and came over to coax her out of the shrubs and told her it wasn't her fault. This is just one example that probably isn't documented, but deaths along River Road are etched in the minds and in crash statistics. Fortunately, Eugene has a new traffic engineer, Matt Rodriguez. After signatures from 250 neighbors were collected, the City Council and Rodriguez installed a pedestrian crossing just north of the connector. Rodriguez has also worked with ODOT to reduce the speed limit from 40 to 35 miles per hour. Attendance at the MPC has taught me 3 things that make a road safer: environment and engineering, education, and enforcement. Our neighbors are looking forward to the River Road Corridor study and the potential siting of MX to improve safety with environmental design and slow vehicle traffic and improve intersections. We want to educate neighbors about rules to make multimodal transportation safe. We appreciate outreach opportunities Eugene will provide with Smart Trips in 2017, allowing individuals and families overcome barriers to choosing transportation modes other than cars. We are also looking forward to Sunday Streets in our neighborhood as a chance to educate families and children about how to walk and ride bicycles safely. One particularly difficult issue is traffic enforcement. With our combination of city and county government, our patchwork. The city of Eugene is working to annex county segments to the city, which will allow Eugene Police to patrol the entire length of River Road in our neighborhood. For the neighborhoods, it is important to put safety first. Please commit to strong, clear plan that will save lives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Rob Sako.
Good morning, Chair Lundberg, members of MPC. I'm Rob Zako, Executive Director of Better Eugene Springfield Transportation. We're changing our name to reflect an expanded mission. Thank you for having me here today. BEST is a broad coalition working for better transportation choices, safer streets, and walkable neighborhoods for everyone. For the Transportation Safety Plan, the threshold question is, should the public care? More to the point, do you care? I apologize for asking this question, but we've seen before plans developed only because the federal government or the state of Oregon had required them, and then seen those plans gather dust on a shelf. In this case, the plan says it's being developed because of federal requirements, Safety Lou, MAP 21, and most recently FAST Act. Second, as drafted, the vision of the plan is this, and I quote, Central Lane Metropolitan Planning Organization envisions a strong culture of safety that prioritizes safety for all people, regardless of mode, and recognizes the importance of every life traveling on our transportation network. If a mother who had just lost her son in a car crash asked you what you're doing, would that be your answer? Would that be your statement of commitment, of your vision? Third, and really to get to the point, BEST has not seen the action in this action plan. There's talk about a framework and strategies, but it's not all clear if and how the plan will be used to guide your investments and your decisions. To be frank, I mean, this is a good draft. Your staff's done really good work. It's a good first start. The advisory committee has done a lot of work. It lays out problems with a lot of data. It offers some strategies and some ideas of what to do, and that's all good as far as it goes. The question is this an action plan? Is this just a plan, or are you planning to take action based upon this? So I'm off my script here. So as you know, BEST is leading a coalition for safer streets for everyone. This growing coalition ranges from youth, safe routes to schools for the 4J, Springfield and Bethel school districts, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, neighbors like Jefferson Westside neighbors who are applying for a safety grant because they've seen a rash of accidents, ARP Oregon that's working in the city of Springfield on age-friendly community. Everywhere we go talking to people about this, everybody wants to save lives. There's no other side to this. This is not a political issue. We want to save lives. And people support this. If you want to take action, the public is behind you. So again, the question is what you want to do. I'm off my script again, sorry. The question is what you want to do. And I have a visual here which I'll hand out. If you'll forgive me, pass this here and pass this here. This is from the Transit Center in New York. It's a foundation that David Bragdon heads up. And it's got this nice graphic about what it takes to make change in a community. And it basically says no one of us is responsible. We citizens have a requirement to speak up, to tell you what's important to you, to offer advice, to support you. Staff needs to do their jobs. And those are the circles, the yellow and little ones here. But the red circle, that's you. You're here to provide leadership. You're here to set priorities. You're here to direct your staff about what's important. And so we're asking you to tell your staff, in fact, if this is important, it's important that this is an action plan to do stuff. So why is this important? The Register Guard runs stories on crashes all the time. There's a category, you can click on it. In the last month, tragically, there have been quite a few crashes in rural Lane County, some of them fatal. Here in the metropolitan area, The most recent story we found about a crash involved a young woman, Carly Gabrielson, I believe is her name, sorry. You may know her. Front page story about a month ago in the Register Guard. On Beltline Highway, a drunk driver driving the wrong way crashed into her. Miraculously, everybody survived. This is why this is important. It could have been you, it could have been me, it could have been our family. So in conclusion, Bess is doing our part, staff is doing their part, we ask you to do your part. You have an opportunity to direct your staff today. If this is important, if you want to save lives, tell them to make this a stronger plan. We'll provide details on how to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Hey, is there anyone else wishing to speak in this public hearing? Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing. And I guess this is, do we want to, you're looking for some feedback from us about the plan and.
Yeah, and if you'd like, I can address some of the ways that the plan does take action. I recognize Rob's comments, but I think that the MPO is sort of limited in the specific actions we can take in terms of engineering because we're not really in the business of building infrastructure, but we do have funding mechanisms that help our partners build infrastructure. And one of the ways that we're going to strengthen that process is we do have safety right now as part of our application, but I think it's been sort of a peripheral, let's just kind of check this off. Yes, this is a safety project. And one of our strategies for MPO staff is to strengthen that requirement and really figure out a way to prioritize our funding mechanism so that it's focusing on safety projects. So that's one way that we can help to build infrastructure that addresses some of these safety concerns. And we will have a person that's directly working on outreach and education that will be solely focused on transportation safety. So I think in the first year, that's the first way that we're going to take action on transportation safety. But I'm open to suggestions from you all about ways that we can strengthen those strategies.
Any, yes.
Alan had his hand up first.
Oh, Ellen.
Thank you. Two things. One, so this isn't the plan, this is just a list of strategies and emphasis
Well, there is
areas, right?
there is a plan that was with the January. Do you need it?
Oh, January.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I'm wondering if the city of Eugene adopted a widely growing policy called Vision Zero, which envisions zero injuries and deaths on a transportation system. And I'm wondering if that's not something the MPO should look at adopting within the safety plan and how it might be integrated into the plan.
We did talk about that throughout the development of the plan, and there was some resistance from some of our partners that they didn't feel like it was appropriate for the MPO to take that vision. But I think the county, if I'm correct, has changed their vision to be towards zero deaths. So that's something that we could do in our vision too, is to, and I think that's ODOT's vision, is that they don't have the Vision Zero language, but they say towards Vision Zero.
They're making that towards zero deaths.
Yeah. So one of the things that we need to add to this plan over the coming year is our performance metrics. So we do have performance measures in this plan, and we'll be identifying some targets for those, which we haven't done. The federal requirement for that is supposed to kick in August of this year. And so over the next year, we'll be developing those targets. And so one of the questions that kind of remains for us is whether those, if we don't reach those targets, if there's going to be funding implications for that. So we want to set the targets in a way that are attainable, while also recognizing that our region is really dedicated to dramatically reducing fatal and severe crashes. So I think that's part of the discussion we've had during the planning process was, do we want to take the practical or do we want to take the visionary?
No, I think you need to do both, but I would like to see the language in there. You know, we don't adopt Vision Zero as policy, I would like to see the language in there. It says, our vision is to see 0 deaths and injuries on the transportation system. Thanks.
With that, Chair. Sid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, as far as the action plan is concerned, I'm looking at Franny, and we kind of had a hallway conversation. This is probably about, I'm not sure how many years ago, but when Franny actually brought this idea, I was board chair at the time, and with my involvement in transportation issues, he brought this idea about this position. And, so it hasn't been that long. So as far as an action plan is concerned, we gotta give a lot of credit to Franny on this. She went out, no, seriously, because she went out and found money, and she was a person who really worked with ODOT and Salem to make sure that this position was gonna be funded. And Franny, again, thank you for that. But I think as far as and I'm glad you brought that up, Alan, as far as Vision Zero, we adopted what's called
Towards 0 deaths.
TZD. I have that piece down. And in fact, Dr. Zako was there at our meeting, and what we found is a lot of the Vision Zero happens within maybe cities. Towards 0 death has actually been adopted by the National Association of Counties. So from a county perspective, that's really what, it's out to accomplish the same thing. And so I think the mission piece on that, because we had that conversation, is it Vision Zero, is it TZD, what is it? We focused on the TZD part. But overall, one of the things, and I'm glad you brought up the fact that as an MPC, because we don't do engineering here, we don't do this type of thing here, but I just want to remind us all of us have a significant sphere of influence within our communities. We're represented transit, cities, counties, Coburg with what's happening there with the industrial side and the housing side that's going on there. We have a sphere of influence, and there's no reason why we can't constantly badger our legislators, our folks back in DC to constantly talk about this, because right now, folks, I don't know about you, but I do not like the fact that Lane County leads the state in deaths, and that is unacceptable. And it's primarily happening in the rural area, and that is just not acceptable at all. We understand that, and we're going to remain aggressive on that, and we're making sure that the language is being adopted by the AOC, because Clackamas is right behind us. Clackamas County is. So when you have two of the larger populated counties, and that's a significant issue, all of a sudden, our commissioners around the state are realizing this can happen in our county, this can happen anywhere. And it's primarily happening in that rural area, and that's something we need to continue to focus on. But I think having a person here who's actually going to be involved in this and work with us and communicate. So let's say we need to communicate something to our legislators. We need to have information. We have a go-to person now that we can say, you know what can you do? What kind of bullet points can we take up to Salem to talk about what needs to be done, so we can get it from not only from a policy standpoint here locally, but statewide, and then really hit the federal issue as well and talk about this is what we need to do. It's about safety. We need to make sure that people are going to be protected when they're just trying to get to their job or trying to go to a birthday party or who knows what. I mean, these are the things that we need to focus in on. So from the action standpoint, I think we're getting there. I'm actually glad, Rob brought that up, and Carlene, I thank you for that's a story none of us like to hear, but I think it's important. We do hear, and because it's real. And I want to say thank you for that. And it's tough to talk about, but Rob's involved in this issue as well, and you can always go to him and talk to him as far as that's concerned. But we just need to be reminded, each of us, we serve on different committees, we have a sphere of influence, let's make sure we use it. And if we use it as one voice on these safety issues, understanding that we have a point person here, I strongly believe we can make a big difference.
Hillary.
Well, the Springfield Council has been keenly aware of the need for safety action. Because of the number of deaths that we've experienced on Main, we have all felt it in our hearts when people are being killed on our streets. And we have taken it to action. And we have added signage, we've added lights, we're trying to make the crosswalks more visible to people who are speeding on Main. We are negotiating with the state, or have negotiated with the state, for lower speed limits. We have taken this for over, I think it's been about a year and a half that we've been working on this. And it's become a priority to us because none of us will tolerate more of the same. We have to find ways of protecting our citizenry. And so, Rob, we're in action, and we will continue to. This is very important to us. And we will work with our partners here too, of course.
Other comments, questions? Franny?
I was looking at Alan, I forgot that you're not a chair. Hi.
It's okay, we're right next.
So I really like that the plan focuses on engineering, enforcement, education, EMS, and on the lines of education. I also noticed that there's a need for the young people in this area to slow down, and a lot of the deaths are from young people and speed. Now, I know that, or what I've understood, is that the state has tried to make driver's education a mandatory thing, and it failed. I think they've tried a few times. I don't know that, I mean, my son just went through driver's ed and then had to take the test. It was really hard to get his driver's license. I mean, 3 times it's a hard test. And so he needed driver's ed just to get through that test, which is a good thing. But I don't know if there's anything this county or any of the jurisdiction can do to incentivize or prioritize or make it even mandatory to have driver's ed for young people. I think it would be a big action. It would be, making a big statement about safety. There may also be a need for, as people age and become, over a certain age, I don't know what it would be, 80 maybe, where they're maybe to keep their license would have maybe some refresher trainings or something, because laws change. And not only do laws change, but the environment that we're driving in changes. We're becoming more and more automated. I mean, there's a lot of things happening with our system. So, in that regard, it seems like there may be some more things that we can do as communities around education that I think we should keep in the forefront and work on. Thanks.
Yes, Pat?
Thanks. Just briefly, we could approach that legislatively. I'd be a supporter of that, absolutely. Mandatory driver ed training. Want to look at the school board, maybe get some school board input for us to see if there's some conditions that exist there. But I think it would be a very positive step. Just wanted to tag along with Sid. The county's been working on this for a long time. And we had a work session in April of last year, I think it was. We went into pretty good depth. And then again on January 24th, where we received a presentation including some proposed revisions, safety revisions, including participation in the National Strategy on Highway Safety Towards Zero Deaths program. And we passed that. So actually it wasn't it was a work session. We intend to pass that. So good work together. I think we're moving in the right direction. But the work's not done, Hillary. You mentioned it. We started after the horrible fatality on Main Street, and that day, I think we had an MPC meeting maybe the next day, Christine, and we started talking about it that day. Dr. Zako was at our meeting last week, and I liked what you said last week better. You said exactly what Josh Scove said, and then you said no more. No, that's not what I said here today. But you've been working on this for a long time, and I'm looking forward to moving towards zero deaths. And as I drive to work every morning, no matter which direction I go, I pass at least 2 schools. And in Bethel, they have those roving "You are traveling" signs. You're traveling at signs, and every time I see that, I look down, and usually, actually, I don't have to look. I'm told you're going 27 miles an hour. I'm like, whoa! But it's an indication to me I want to go 20, but I just the body doesn't acknowledge that sometimes. I think there are lots of things that we can do to keep the speed down, to keep the keep people from texting while they're driving, for instance. So I'm excited about the direction that we're going. So thank you.
So I'll add a couple of thoughts. I'm very happy that we're looking at performance measures because I think that will help us a lot to determine, what's effective. I'm always trying to figure out what's an effective measure that will help us actually reach what we're going, because some things I think sound great, but maybe they sound great because most of us are trying to go the speed limit and we're not drinking and driving and we're not texting, whatever, we're basically doing everything like we should. So the folks that are drinking and driving, speeding and all of that, is that the message may need to be different, and we may need a different kind of education, a different kind of enforcement, whatever. So trying to isolate exactly who it is and what it is, and maybe it is young people that are speeding, or because they're fearless and they're never going to die, or whatever they think is not effective. Maybe it is driver's ed, and we need to figure it out. When I went to school, by golly, you got a police officer that rode with you in the driver's ed seat. So you definitely, so that was way back when, you had a trailer came in, you watched movies, you had to, and the whole 9 yards. So it was very, very comprehensive in terms of what a driver's ed class could be. And yes, I would be very interested in, what we could do, although understanding there's no money anywhere, and we see it every day in the paper, then where the heck we would get money unless it's maybe the insurance companies or something that, who is it that might be able to help us fund a driver's education? I like that speeding and drunk driving has been somewhat prioritized. Definitely we'll have to address so the texting and other things. I think I wait at stoplights much longer now after they turn green, and all I can go is the person ahead of me is still looking at their phone when they should have been going because the light turned green, because that's the only reason I can figure out why they're still sitting when the light turned green. So there's lots of things we can do. I know that AARP is working on, we're going through a planning process. So before we pick specifically Vision Zero, or even towards zero, which I think is probably more realistic, is to go through the planning process at AARP, where you look at all your planning and what you're doing, because they have a very comprehensive approach to age-friendly communities and what that means, so that you can get people from point A to B safely, no matter what mode of transportation they're on. And as the person who sat in the kitchen of the parents that lost the children, I absolutely don't want to replicate that anytime, ever again. So very interested in it. I think this is a very good start, and of course we now have our arts grant to help us address safety needs, but I'll be very interested in what you learn. And then I think for a lot of us, it's what's working in other places. So maybe it's not so much that we have a plan, but what does work in other areas. I'm learning a lot from AI because now I'm on their mailing list, and you get all these communities and what they're doing. So I think it's very helpful. So I think that would be helpful too, if we knew some of the techniques, particularly once you see performance measures. These are what other communities have found to be effective, that would help us be able to make some decisions about what we might want to consider. Yes.
I'd like to add just one really exciting thing. I was at Willamette High School all morning today. It's their government class, and the kids in the class had teams that were writing bills, some for federal, some for state. I worked with 3 kids who had a bill. And I told them how to get this bill into the legislature this year. Through gut and stuff is what it would have to be this year. But it's a bill to make mandatory an app on your phone that makes it so that you don't, you cannot text while you're driving over 10 miles an hour is what their idea was. They have the funding mechanism in place, they have all, and it's been tried, and there are actually apps available on it. And these folks are going to go to their state senator with a bill in hand this week or next week to see if they can get that moving through the legislature this year. And it's too late to add new bills, but I said, oh, look for the pertaining to line, you know, look for the, and just if it says driving on there, well, there's a good and stuff opportunity. So they're armed with this, and we may see something happen. And, you know, imagine that. Imagine you cannot text. You physically can't text if you're driving. What a great thing that would be. And you think of it as teenagers, but Christine just mentioned, well, I only text when I'm at a red light. Well, you have the light turn green.
And they're not teenagers.
Precisely. So, you know, there are things that we can do that really aren't necessarily going to cost money. And once again, they have a mechanism in place that is relatively onerous. Is that a word? But it's exciting. Kids are thinking about it. Thanks.
Great. Yes, Gary.
Yes, Madam Chair, I would like to comment on the bike ped. The first and last mile, the safe routes to schools. We need to continue, we have been, but we need to continue to work at opportunities to be more creative in how to get this stuff done. Because if you do live in the River Road area or Santa Clara where I do, there's an awful lot of streets we have no sidewalks. Bethlehem, same way. Springfield, you can go to places in Springfield, same situation. We need to look at ways of facilitating that because folks will be able to utilize some of the other infrastructure, mass transit, if it's easier to get to. And so that becomes safer. And so I see that as an exciting opportunity for all of us to look at ways that we can help because today, in many of the cities' ordinances relative to the sidewalk is the responsibility of the property owner. And so maybe there's a way that we can incentivize that or something to make some of those improvements because I think of the North Kenzie area that, you know, there's a ton of roads out there that have no sidewalks.
You're thinking of Gillen Road, aren't you?
But all of those things I think would enhance the safety in our entire community. And that's where the culture issue comes in. And thinking of it from a culture, just, hey, we're going to do everything to make it safe for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Yes.
May I just ask a quick beginner process question?
Yeah.
If someone in this group has a great idea, like let's say Franny's idea of mandatory driver's education or something, the good ideas come out, what happens to those?
Well, I think I'll speak on behalf of staff that becomes part of what staff can give us feedback on. Yes, at a future.
Well, to use Franny as an example, I mean, I think that's part of this planning process. So that feedback would either be incorporated into the plan or into our Safe Communities program as something that staff person would work on as a way to implement safety measures for our area.
Okay, so would we know that later? Or would we know that something?
I mean, that one's a little bit tricky because it's not under our authority. I mean, we can't change that one, but we can work, I mean, we can kind of keep it in our toolkit to work on. So when we're partnering with the DMV to address some of those issues, I mean, we don't actually make the decision about that.
Right.
But we can certainly do the collaboration piece of it.
So I guess, I'll just ask, once it becomes in the plan, it's part of the toolkit, then it could be up to any one of us or all of us to say we want to prioritize driver's ed, and so we can look to the jurisdictions or organizations that could take on that specific task and figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? And it could be BEST, or someone that takes, talks to insurance company, does that there, and I'm looking at Rob, maybe that's something we could look into. But that would be, I want to say, a more typical route to how we actually, it works its way up to become something that we take on and we figure out a solution, we figure out how to make it happen. So, that help? Yes.
I was going to say that if it doesn't necessarily fit in the item that we're talking about, like this idea because it's not appropriate for our plan. There's at the very end of the agenda is F6, which is next steps agenda build. So it becomes incumbent upon each of us to kind of track these things too. And if we think they're a good idea, that's when we bring that up and say, can we have staff come back and bring up MPC support for potential legislation on mandatory driver's ed or the app or something like that. And so that's where you would track it and kind of incumbent upon yourself. But getting it on the agenda is the first thing.
Anything else on this topic?
So I just wanted to clarify, I heard a couple of people show support for rewriting the vision statement to include the towards vision idea. Is there anybody that disagrees with that, or?
Could we see what the county, I'm not familiar with what the county
Their
signed
vision.
on to.
Yeah, I don't have their new, do you guys have their new?
It's online.
You can go to our
Yeah.
2012 agenda.
So we could send out
Yeah,
their,
we can send that out.
we did originally have the same vision statement, and then now that the county has included the towards vision, so I could send both of those and maybe we could move back towards having the same vision statement.
Yes,
Maybe you guys can inform me, Pat and Sid, what's the difference between Vision Zero and towards zero deaths?
The Vision Zero originated in Sweden, I believe.
Yeah.
And so it's it's really, the ultimate goal is the same. Towards zero deaths kind of, I guess it probably acknowledges it as a route toward zero deaths. This I don't think there's really any difference. We had this question, the question came up last Tuesday, we'd go Tuesday, and really it's,
Well, I think-
Branding.
and I think,
I mean,
well,
Is it just?
I think typically Vision Zero plans do have a date in which they anticipate reaching that zero number. And I don't know that the Towards Vision has that strict of a deadline where it says at this year, we will see zero deaths. So it's, our actions are moving us towards zero deaths, whereas Vision Zero is a much stronger, we will not tolerate deaths on our roads.
When we took this up at the city of Eugene, we said, our vision is to have zero deaths in our transportation system and zero injuries. And then we tasked staff with coming back to us with things that they would do and incorporate into what we're already doing to implement that and make that happen. So in that sense, I guess it is essentially the same thing. It's what are the actions we're going to take to get towards zero deaths? And maybe it is just branding. I don't know if Rob has anything to add to it since he's kind of the
Well, it is
expert.
branding to an extent, but the Towards Zero Death is more of a rural initiative that was put forth by the National Association of Counties. It's been signed on to by the National Association of County Engineers and ASHTO as well. And you know, as we've been putting this together, one of the things that was stark to me is that between 2014 and 2015, the United States saw the greatest increase in fatalities that it's seen in 50 years in any one-year period, and that was by 8%. The state of Oregon led the United States because we had 26% increase in deaths between 2014 and 2015. Lane County mirrored that at 26%. So I so appreciate the coordinated and collaborative effort and the leadership that's being put forth on this. This will certainly be the most exciting thing that I work on the rest of my career.
So cities are adopting Vision Zero and counties are adopting
Essentially,
TZD.
yes.
That seems to be the case.
So I'm going to say that we haven't talked about it, well, we have talked about it at our council, and it was no at our council. So that would have to be a revisiting of exactly what we, I'm not comfortable today saying yes, because it wasn't agreed upon when it was brought up before. And it didn't have to do with that we're in disagreement with the concept. The idea is we need more information about who are we addressing, what are we addressing, what are the measures that you take, and I would ask that, you know, perhaps I'll look at Gino, that we have some sort of a, you know, a work session or something where we can look at exactly what all it entails, but it wouldn't be today wouldn't be the day I could do that.
Well, and I could say that we have another opportunity to revisit this when we come back with our targets. So we will be setting targets at some point before August, and so maybe that would be a good time to talk about it. And I think that was, some of our jurisdictions had resistance to it, and I think the targets were another reason why we didn't have the Vision Zero language in the vision statement, was that we are going to be setting targets, and we didn't know if there was going to be implications for the MPO if we didn't meet those targets. I don't think that there are, as much as I've talked to ODOT about it, that I think we could potentially have a target of 0, not reach it, and not have funding implications, but we need to better understand that before we put that into our language, I think. So we'll have an opportunity before the end of the year to revisit it, and we could talk about it before we do those targets in August.
And I think it's part of our AARP planning to look at exactly our, what we want in the way of a livable community, which has a lot to do with transportation. So I want to see them have an opportunity, that committee, which of course I'll be on, so is have a chance to take a look at, best practices and things like that, or, where we're lacking, and see the implications before, so we can make a good argument for where we want to be. I'm pretty quick, so Hillary and then Alan.
Well, I think our experience with Springfield Council has been working very hard to reduce and eliminate highway deaths, and finding that we have not been able to do that. And even though we've initiated a number of actual steps. And I think that's one thing that comes to mind when you ask for a 0 deaths. You're going to have to keep upping your action plan if it's not working, because one of the things we have a hard time affecting is texting and substance abuse. We can't put road signs, we can't lower the speed limit, we can't force people education, maybe through education. Do they understand the consequences of their actions? But I think when you say 0 tolerance, that commits you to continually increasing your actions to bring that about.
Alan.
So maybe we move this forward, maybe we could see the language that Lane County, and you could send that around,
Yep,
and
we can do
and
that.
then that would give you guys something to discuss that's more concrete. That might be language that we might want to put into the plan.
Yeah.
Sid.
One thing that's part of our plan as well at Wayne County that we've included is public health. And I mean, because the reality is, in fact, the Oregon Transportation Commission now has, in fact, you can see it on their website, on ODOT's website, there's a public health component now in every transportation plan you have to adopt. And the counties are the public health authorities. We've had public health engaged in this. Obviously, public safety. And our issue really has been we don't have a traffic team any longer. And due to obvious reasons, for some reason the AP decided to write an article that's 2 years old, that there's a 90% reduction in federal monies to timber counties. Were we aware of that? Yeah, I think, anyway, but we told them they were wrong. It was 91% in Lane County. Anyway, but I think that's an important piece to add, is that this, because what's happening is it's more than just that. It's a public health issue now, and I'm really pleased that our public health staff members are engaged in this and understand that, because I think you have to look at it really from that perspective, not just whether it's a car accident or not, but the fact that, if somebody's killed, that's one thing, but if somebody's maimed for life, who's paying for that? And those are the things that we really as a county are looking at beyond just the statistics. And I think you have to look beyond the statistics. That's why I thought Carlene's testimony here was so, because you have one person who was scared to death, they thought they caused the accident. You don't know what kind of trauma that's going to have on that individual. And again, that becomes a public health issue. And so I'm just going to put that out there, and we have that in our plan, and And Tim's done an incredible job as a public works director, but I got to tell you, Becky Taylor and David Reeser are just, and I urge them to take this on a roadshow. And really, so other counties in the state get to see exactly what's happening and how we're trying to, from a, more than just adoption, that when Rob talks about action plan, we want to put this as an absolute clear action plan. And I'll just leave it at that, but it's been a good discussion to me.
And just to add on to that a little bit, I do want to add that we have gotten buy-in from H&HS and the Sheriff's Department, and Public Works is going to send an engineering team to investigate every serious and fatal accident in the county so that we can find the underlying causes so that we can put performance measures in place.
Great.
Yep.
Yes, Gary.
Yeah, I guess when I first heard about Vision Zero, my thought was we could call it the Bound to Fail program, because you couldn't get to zero. But now the more I look at it, I'm thinking in the context of history. Would it have been as important if Lyndon Johnson in 1964 would have signed the partial civil rights bill? Or if the medical profession had bought into sort of eliminating smallpox? So to me, this is that just because you don't get to zero the first year doesn't mean you've failed. And just because you don't get to zero the second year, you fail. But if that isn't the vision, then there's really no sense of trying to accomplish it to me. So, sorry to sound cynical, but that's where I've come to on it.
Is that the feedback that you needed?
Yeah.
Is that enough?
Yeah. So we will send you all both vision statements, and we can discuss whether we can continue the discussion
Yes.
about whether we want to revise our vision statement to have the word zero in it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, next item, and we'll try to get back on track here time-wise a little bit. Critical urban freight corridors. Kelly? Hi.
Hi. I'm Kelly Clark with LCOG, Transportation Planner. I'd ask you to switch gears a little bit and talk about freight for a few minutes here. So ODOT is working on updating a state freight plan, and as part of that, addressing a requirement from the FAST Act, which is the Transportation Act, to designate 77 miles of critical urban freight corridors throughout the urban regions of the state of Oregon. So they're coordinating with the state's 8 MPOs, which are transportation planning, or metropolitan planning organizations, to do this. And for a little bit more detail, the critical urban freight corridors are corridors that provide important connections to the national highway freight network. And so I provided a map in your packet that shows exactly what that network currently is, and that's that line in blue on the map shows the National Highway Freight Network. The red shows the National Highway System, so you can see that freight network is kind of a subcomponent of that freight network, or the highway system. And again, it's targeted towards supporting freight throughout the state of Oregon and nationally. And so adding mileage to this network supports National Highway as well as multimodal freight system goals at the federal level by targeting direct investment to these corridors that really do support freight and improve system performance and efficient freight movement. And they allow expanded use of the National Highway federal funds and fast lane grant programs so that we can really focus on system improvements within those freight networks. And so ODOT convened a meeting with the state's 8 MPOs January 20th to discuss the criteria for designating these additional corridors and to figure out kind of an allotment for how much each of these MPOs should get of these 77 miles. So we start thinking about 77 miles doesn't go very far statewide. And so ODOT's working on an approach for that allocation, and they're basing it on factors from the highway plan that they can pull out, including mileage, commodity flows, and truck average daily trip data. And they're trying to see what they can draw out of the model to help create some kind of equitable way of allocating miles. And we haven't heard what that allocation is yet. We'll hopefully will over the next couple weeks. In the meantime, us at the MPO level, we'll be working to see kind of what our current and near-term freight-related investments are, so we can target our corridors, our draft corridors on those current investments that we do have. And so we'll be looking at what the regional transportation system plan is saying, what local transportation system plans have, and what the city and county's capital improvement plan says for what our current investments are that are directly related to freight. We need to have a draft list to ODOT by the end of February, beginning of March. And ODOT is planning on, or needs to have their freight plan updated by February of this year. So it'll move kind of quickly, and we'll bring back our draft list at your next meeting.
Okay.
And happy for any questions.
Can I ask I'm looking at the freight corridor, and it looks like, I'm looking, it doesn't have Coburg, which is one of our metropolitan policy communities, but I'm looking at just off of I-5, only in Eugene. Is it actually part of the freight corridor? Streets in Eugene?
That's right, for the blue, the freight corridor.
Right.
So the only part of the National Highway Freight Network that's identified within this MPO is the I-105 and then the Cross Roosevelt connection up to the Pacific Highway 99. And that's just what that freight network currently is in this area.
Okay. Question? Yes, Pat.
Where is the West Eugene Parkway on this?
The West Eugene Parkway?
Oh, it's not on here.
I think there's a vote coming up on it.
No, we already had 2.1.
I live in Springfield.
So actually, so the Pacific Highway, I've not heard that designation for I-5 in a long, long time. I'm talking about Springfield right now. I use, quite often when I'm going over Highway 58, I go through Springfield, and I know a lot of trucks do. The Bob Sprout Parkway, for instance, you know how that connects I-105 or 126 directly over to Jasper Road, and I know a lot of trucks drive that.
Okay.
So that just came to mind for me.
Great.
That's why I was asking that question, is it, it's not showing, but where the trucks are actually at is different.
But this is an opportunity to look at where, are there other freight areas that we need to add to that list? And that's what we're trying to do here, so appreciate that.
And I'm not sure how far out we're looking, but the mayor mentioned the Coburg area. And, the Coburg transportation plan is in the works right now, and there's a lot of activity going to happen in Coburg. And I don't know, it's going to be probably some years before much of that is realized, but there's going to be another freight route around the north end of Coburg somehow, somewhere. It's not exactly designated yet.
Okay.
Then the other area that really comes to mind for me is something the county's been working on for quite some time, down around the Goshen area.
Okay.
You have, Highway 58 comes into I-5 right there. And once again, for future reference, there's going to be, I would hope and anticipate, a great deal of freight activity in that area, particularly if at some point we had maybe a transload planned at someplace in that area.
And this is such a different type of effort because we're used to kind of thinking of systems and networks. And this is a targeted investment type of effort, and so these are really good places to look at to see how those corridors do support freight, and if that's what we want to strategize our allocation on.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for listening.
I have Ellen and then Sid.
Yeah, it was 77 miles for the entire state.
For the entire, the urban areas. I didn't mention that the state's also working on 155 miles of allocation for the rural areas. So that's an effort that's ongoing as well.
Yeah, on top of the 77.
On top of the 77, yep. So the 77 is just within the 8 MPOs.
Oh, okay. And then how do you get, so the difference is that you're then eligible for funding for system performance and efficient freight movement through the fast lane programs? Is that if you're designated as a National Highway Freight Network?
So there are a couple federal funding programs that are targeted towards freight. That is the National Highway Freight Program formula funds, and then the Fast lane, fast lane grant program funds, and those funds would be expanded to those corridors once they're adopted.
The one that I see a ton of freight trucks on is Beltline, and the Randy Pape Beltline.
Okay.
Coming off of, especially coming off of I-5, there's just an enormous amount of trucks on that, on that highway, all the way to West 11.
Another thing that we can do is not just look at a whole corridor, but segments of a corridor in order to make our allocation go further and kind of spread that peanut butter, to use that analogy. We can look at just a targeted area of a corridor that is a problem area or a more congested area or not supporting freight that we want it to.
Right, if you're going to do that, then the area right around where Delta Highway and Beltline would be a great place to do that. That gets a lot of congestion, and freight can't move through that critical part from 4 to 6 very easily.
Great.
Neither can anybody, but it's also not that safe.
Sid?
So the question I have is because our focus here is on the MPO. And we, the Lane Area Commission on Transportation, received a really good, we had a joint meeting with the Oregon Freight Advisory Committee. So maybe the question I have, and Brenda, I don't know if this is for you or for both of you, is the coordinated efforts. So between the MPO, the ACT, but also the Governor's Regional Solutions Team, because there seems to be a lot of, it's fluid right now, but like Commissioner Farr mentioned, you know, the potential of a transload facility and a significant one. And I know I've had conversations with Commissioner Nyquist in Lynn County. There's a, and so Jackie's looking at different, Michelonis from the Governor's office is looking at different areas, but it's outside of the MPO. So I think it's important to make sure the efforts are coordinated, because we see this map, and yeah, I would agree with Pat and Christine as far as Coburg. You know, the Bob Straub Parkway I think makes sense because that was built, because South 42nd Street used to be the truck route till the accident, and now the Bob Straub Parkway has taken that away because it's a straight shot now off of 126. So there's some things to add. But I believe trying to coordinate with the ACT, but also with the Regional Solutions Team, I think many of us have read the issues that are happening at the Terminal 6, the Port of Portland. Our conversations with them says that's not going to be resolved for at least another 18 months. And yet we have a significant ag business right here in Lane County, right in our metro area, that rely on shipping products. And the next step is, well, will it make sense to put together a major transload facility? They're calling it something else. I'm old school.
Transfer,
Transfer?
because it's a box to box.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm old school. Anyway, so transfer. And really it is about making sure, because if it's not going to happen in the Port of Portland, those goods are going to continue to go out either Port of Tacoma or out of the Port of Oakland. But it's got to make sense, because you're going to unload, load, and then either go up by rail or significant trucks, like some of the high-tech trucks we've seen, where driverless, 6 in a row, that's scary. But I think the coordination piece is going to be key, especially with the Regional Solutions Team, to kind of see where are these different freight routes and positions going to be happening that will directly affect not just the Lane County, but Eugene, Springfield, and Coburg, and the MPO.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really important piece of this. This is such a small subset of the actual state freight plan, where they're looking at delay across the state, and what is that? What is the impact of that statewide? The delays in Portland are, trickling down to Southern Oregon and causing issues. And so there's that piece. They're looking at updating the intermodal corridor connections, and those are the corridors that do provide connections to a facility that then might take goods away on rail or airports, so they're kind of intermodal. And then looking at prioritizing projects and an investment strategy for that, and how do we get to a better system statewide. I don't know if you have anything to add, Franny, but I think that's the umbrella for the statewide coordination that's happening.
And I would agree with the additions from Alan and Christine and and Pat. And as far as Coburg, Bob Stark Parkway, and of course Beltline. Yeah, I totally agree with you there. And so I think that those need to be, we need to have added language as far as those are concerned, because they truly are, in the MPO area, to me, they're significant enough to add as far as having the urban freight route is concerned, the critical freight route.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yeah.
I just want to make sure I really understand what we're doing here. So there's a total of 77 miles divided among 8 jurisdictions. So so that means they each have sort of 10 miles to work with, or a little bit less than 10 miles to work with. And so we're giving a list, and then it'll come back as sort of, these are the ones you got?
Well, so it's kind of an iterative process, but we're waiting on ODOT to come up with a draft or proposal for what they think the allocation should be, based on some of these factors. Likely, Portland Metro will have the biggest allocation because they have the highest number of existing lane mileage for highways, the most commodity, these factors that they're looking into. And then the other MPOs will have a smaller allocation. So what we can do is we can have our draft set of corridors, and once we get our allocation, look again at the mileage of the corridors we've come up with, and what ODOT has called it is scrubbing. So we scrub away kind of the areas of those corridors that may not be critical till we get to our critical corridors that do meet our allocation that we've been given.
I see. Okay, thank you.
And again, it is really an effort to look as close and myopically as we can at just the critical areas that need investment, so we can know where to target those investments when they do come in. It's not a promise for investment, but when there is some opportunities, then we know where to go.
Those are the priority ones.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Gino?
Are there any constraints that go along with being named a corridor?
As far as like a to
Well,
allocate to.
Well, I noticed that no constraints in terms of something you have to do on the highway or you can't do on the highway because you are named a corridor.
I don't think so that I've heard of.
There could be. I'm just thinking, we have these reduction review routes, special review procedures for proposed improvements along these special routes, and it's possible that by adding a freight route, that could put it into this category of requiring a special review. It makes it different, it makes it more challenging. There's a special review to make sure nothing reduces the hole in the air, we call it, for freight movement. Specifically, it could mean curb extensions on some streets in downtown areas. Sometimes if it's the freight industry may object to those kinds of things. So potentially, I'm not sure of that, but that's one possibility.
Can we get some, I'll look at Brenda, get some clarification about, what might be, or, if someone can give us some clarification. It could be just a little memo or something.
Yes.
What that would do to us.
I'll work with Kelly and we can follow up.
I'm just wondering, it's kind of out of the jurisdiction I work for, but it looks like either 6th or 7th is a corridor, and it might be good for people to examine, is there still the benefit to having that as a corridor? Can that corridor be removed? And that would be obviously a decision for the city of Eugene, but just wondering.
Yes, Tom.
Since you mentioned 6th, 7th, I'll just say that when we were designing the West Eugene line, it goes on 6th and 7th. I think it may have to do more with the fact that it's a state freight facility than there's a federal designation, though there are both. That the state required that we had to demonstrate that we would not decrease the level of service that existed when we started designing. So we couldn't make congestion worse. So that's why we had some of the construction that we did. So those kinds of things, I don't know if they pertain to the federal designation, but that would be a type of thing that we've experienced.
We can follow up on that and send out a memo.
That would be great.
To address that. That's a good question.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Okay, great. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
All right, next is the City of Eugene request to reprogram STIPU funds. And, okay, so, is your name Paul too?
It is not. I'm Dan Collister. Paul asked me to fill in. I'm transportation planner.
Okay, all right.
That makes it easier for you. Yes, the request is to reprogram some STPU discretionary funds from one Eugene project to another Eugene project to the amount of $943,000 from the Ruth Bascom Riverfront Path reconstruction to project development for seismic strengthening of bridges. These aren't any new funds, just moving existing funds. TPC unanimously supported this request, and what we would need is a public hearing today and then MPC action at the March meeting.
Gary.
And just to clarify, you're not really taking away from the bike path because you already have that money,
Yes,
correct?
thank you. Yeah, the city is using city revenue for that project.
Great, thank you.
That's what's being proposed.
Other questions about this? Do we need a motion?
No.
No.
Madam Chair, we need a
Oh,
public hearing opened.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to open the public hearing. Is there anyone wishing to speak to this item?
No one has signed up.
Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing. And we don't need to give you any other feedback or action to say there's an action.
Take feedback if you had it.
Okay, yes.
As a Springfield resident, Lane County Commissioner, if this is what Eugene wants, great.
Ditto. Yes, Alan.
Just,
No issue.
yeah, it's an important issue, obviously, that our bridges, there's 13 that are identified here as and this would provide the design work, not the actual upgrades, but the design work to get to the upgrade, to figure out what the upgrades would need to be. And the list of 13 bridges that go over highways and streets are listed on page 2 of the handout. So and when you read that list, you go, I've been over that bridge, I've been over that bridge, I've been over that bridge. Makes me a little bit worried, but hopefully we'll get it fixed before the big one happens.
Okay. So I think that sounds good. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan.
So next item is our congestion mitigation and air quality funding. And that's also Paul. who
And that'll
does
be
the-
me.
Which will be Brenda.
Thank you, Chair Lundberg. I have asked Paul to go to Salem today to sit into a special OTC meeting where they are receiving the preliminary findings of their agency audit. And I'll talk a little bit about that later, but that's why he's not here today, and we're all stepping in for him. So, as you know, this body directed us, staff, to work with ODOT and the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments to talk about how to make both of our MPOs whole for CMAQ funding that we were eligible for but did not receive over the past several years. We were able to work out an agreement with ODOT whereby the ODOT agreed to make us whole for part of those years that we were not receiving funding that we were eligible for, and we brought that agreement back to this body, and you've approved it. Some things that have happened since then, we realized that ODOT staff had used numbers that we were not familiar with, nor could we tie out to anything to determine what the final allocation was. So we asked ODOT staff to take a look at those numbers again. They were supposed to use air quality population numbers, but they were not aware that they were supposed to do that. We worked out an additional agreement with Mid-Willamette Valley COG, so the initial allocation to the Central Lane MPO, which was approximately a little over $6.5 million, will be $7 million now, and we've all agreed to that increased funding. So $7 million will be coming to the Central Lane MPO to make us whole for that CMAQ funding. This will not be redistribution funding. That was another issue and policy decision that this body made, that that funding would not come from the other MPO's distribution, so there won't be distribution funding. ODOT would like to see all of the funding, the $7 million, be fully programmed by our MPO and the Mid-Willamette Valley COG MPO in FY17 or FY18. We had assured them during the negotiations that we did have projects that would be eligible for CMAQ funding and would be ready to spend that money. We are currently developing a process and an initial list of potential projects to be programmed with the $7 million, and we'll be bringing that back to this body either in March or April, so stay tuned for that. And staff are continuing to have conversations about what that funding can be used for, and again, we'll bring back proposed projects that would be eligible for that funding at a later meeting. So that's my update on the CMAQ funding.
And there's been one CMAQ meeting about the pie.
The future pie.
Yeah, the future pie.
Yes.
And what gets done with that. And there'll be another meeting coming up. I think it's in February. I think it's this month.
Correct. So
Yes,
for
I'm looking at Tom.
It's
Also, yes.
for some background, congestion mitigation and air quality funding is federal funding that comes to ODOT and is allocated to areas in the state that are CMAQ qualified areas. In Lane County, there are two. There's the Eugene Spring, the MPO, the Central Lane MPO, and Oak Ridge. And we recently received confirmation that the Central Lane MPO is a qualifying area and has been for a number of years, but we have not been receiving this money. That's the same for the Mid-Willamette Valley area MPO. So the Salem Kaiser area, excuse me. That means that the pie for CMAQ funding that the state allocates to those areas now has more pieces that need to be cut out of it. And so Mayor Lundberg is involved in those conversations about how do we, in the future, go forward and split that pie. And those are going to be very contentious conversations. They already are. And so we'll continue to bring updates back to this group on how that conversation is going.
And Tom also is the other member.
Correct.
With myself on it. And so in contentious, it's hard to understand because, it depends on what you count, how you count it, who you count. And that's sort of the discussion at this moment is who gets to count what. And so it will be a contentious discussion because some folks have to look at future funding in a different way that outside of what they're used to. Yes, and
I just want to take the time to say thank you to Mayor Lundberg. And thank you to our staff on this. I've had the pleasure of serving with Christine now for 18 years, either directly or indirectly. And what I've found over the years, if she decides to put her claws into something, either it gets resolved or her claws stay in it. So, and I just, so, all they do.
okay. Well,
I've seen her temper before. So anyway, but I will say thank you, Christine, for your work on this. Seriously, I think with that and the good work on our staff here locally, who really brought forth the information, but you stuck it out. The only thing I did is I made a call to the OTC chair and I said, please keep an open mind, which she did, and I'll give her credit. She brought the partners together and said, how do we resolve this? But Christine, thank you, because the fact that you mentioning this is dollars that should have been allocated to us for years. We were passed by, and not only us, but up north in the Salem Kaiser and that MPO as well. So, just really good work, Christine, really. and I just want to say thank you for really making the case, and great work by the staff for providing the information so she could make the excellent case. Good teamwork on this one. Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely have to say it was the staff it was Paul and Brenda that said, we've been due this money forever, and we need to stick with it. So put together great information and work, just made it possible. Thank you.
Just very quickly, Patty, you asked how we get things done or how we follow up. Commissioner Lai can just explain. Don't take them out.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So we'll keep you posted how these next meetings are going, because that'll be a whole different level of how to make it work. Tom can attest to that. Did you have anything to add about that? We phoned in on the last because it was that horrible. There's something about, there was a weather thing going on. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's scary.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that if people ask, why does the MPC exist? That this is a prime example of why the MPC exists. And I want to give special thanks to Paul, who's been a bulldog on this. He's the one who has stood up to other organizations and said, this isn't right, here's why it isn't right, and we've got the proof to show why it isn't right. And to all the members of the MPC who have banded together to work on this. It's been a very impressive activity, including making contacts with our legislative representatives, co-opting with the Salem-Kaiser District, and all the work that's gone into this has been very impressive. At the risk of sounding schizophrenic from my prior comments, which were kind of negative, I think this has been a very positive thing, and that we owe a lot to the COG too for supporting this.
It's why we're here.
Yeah.
Help you be successful.
And also to Franny, who has been who's been a
Kept my head down.
you know, I was thinking with all the activity you've had on highways with things, I was going to change your name to Fran Slide, but you've also been very positive and have taken and passed on some of the flack that we've given you, and it's been a good effort.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so I think we're ready for the next update, which is legislative, and looks like you're Paul again.
That's right, thank you. So the legislature kicked off yesterday, and I spent all day there yesterday, and it was quite exciting. There were a lot of things going on for the first day, mostly administrative, but there were some deals already being made. There were some PERS bills that were heard, and the Joint Transportation Committee actually released their proposed framework last night. And so I have provided you a copy of it, but I know you haven't had time to read it, so I'll summarize it for you really quick. So the Joint Legislative Committee is establishing 4 work groups, each focus on a different subject area. Membership will be from the Joint Committee. Work groups should be finalized in a couple of days, but that will be highway maintenance, preservation, and seismic updates as 1. Traffic congestion and freight mobility is 2. Public transportation. There he is. Well, do you want to step in? No, okay. Before you even take your coat off, I'll finish up the legislative, and then we'll have Paul step in again. He has an update on how the preliminary results of the ODOT audit went. Public transportation and safety, mostly safe routes to school, those types of programs will be another committee, and multimodal freight, another committee. There is also talk about having a revenue committee, and personally, I think that'd be a really great idea. The committee work group meetings will be Mondays and Wednesday evenings, starting at 5:30, with the idea that they'll get more participation that way. They expect to have a bill by early April, so we'll see whether or not they stick to that schedule. They need to, they're very interested in the internal audit, and again, Paul will provide an update about that. So this document outlines the framework and the goals for new transportation investment will be protecting Oregon's investment in our existing infrastructure, approving accountability in the selection and delivery of transportation investments, supporting the economy by ensuring efficient movement of people and goods and resolving congestion problems, so many of the things we've already talked about, preparing the system for a Cascadia event, replacing aging bridges to improve safety, resilience, and continuality of freight and traffic systems, improving public transportation to connect people and communities all across the state, streamlining the process to get transportation projects developed, selected, and implemented, making the system safer, maximizing opportunities for federal participation in our transportation system plans and funding, ensuring that our projects are equitable, and making sure that we're using our resources cost effectively. And so that's the beginning framework. That information and that framework came out of the road show that they have been engaged in over the last year. And so we'll be very interested to see what they come up with, and we'll be watching this very carefully and make sure that you have update and are able to weigh in when that opportunity comes up. So happy to answer any questions about the proposed transportation framework. Again, this is just the very beginning. This package will be worked on very intensely, I would imagine, over the next several weeks.
And we can send out, if you'd like, the legislative framework that the Joint Committee put out this week, as well as the...
That's what this is.
Okay, you got it. I wasn't sure if it got brought in. Thanks. There are a few other things, like the House bill that was introduced. I don't know if you mentioned that.
Not yet. If there are no questions on the legislative framework. So a House bill has been introduced, House Bill 2532. It's sponsored primarily by Portland area legislators, but it does a couple of different things. We believe it would be significant. It would direct the OTC to adopt rules on establishing basically a framework for scoring and ranking of transportation projects that are being considered by the OTC for inclusion in the statewide transportation improvement program. It directs ODOT to publish certain information on its website about how the selection process will take place and about which projects are being considered for inclusion in the statewide transportation improvement program. It directs ODOT to use least cost planning and practical design, and to report to the legislature on the results of using that least cost planning and practical design, and also directs them to update the highway design manual. So we'll be watching this bill very carefully as well.
So can I ask a question? Is it geared a little towards Portland?
Well, they are sponsoring this bill also with a legislator from the Corvallis area, but I believe that this is an effort to get more transparency out of the process, as well as to have clear ideas about how the selection of projects takes place. That actually was one of the preliminary findings of the internal audit that was released today. Paul sent me an update from the meeting as it was going on. So
maybe that would be the next. Are you going to give us an update on where we're at, and maybe answer the question: is this bill a good thing or a bad thing for us?
This bill, I'm not ready to make that judgment. It is very likely that if it proceeds, it will get modified a little bit, but also, it's not all that different from the legislature several years ago, many years ago, asking ODOT to develop a least cost planning tool. In some ways, now that that tool's been out there, Mosaic, This is a little bit of a follow-on to say, start putting some of those least cost planning criteria into practice. I think it is, Brenda's correct, that it's to bring more transparency and more specificity to the selection process, which was called out in the management assessment. And also really to probably, if you want me to be frank, prioritize in Portland Metro's eyes some of the freight bottlenecks and issues that they're facing there as statewide importance.
Paul, thank you for mentioning that. And I'm not going to, I think it's going to be very important we monitor this. And what the framework is showing, there's some capital projects that eat up an enormous amount of money, and they're basically in three primary areas. Moda Center, I-5, 205, additional lanes, and 217. And that eats up clearly between $400 and $600 billion. So I just need to throw that out to you. That's in today's costs. And so I think it's important we monitor. Least cost planning, no issue. I think that's probably a pretty good way to look at things, but I just ask we continue to monitor this significantly. Otherwise, it's going to be this thing where they get the cake and we're going to get the crumbs. And it's something we just need to be careful of. That's all. I'll just leave it at that.
Yes, Alan?
Yeah, I think the least cost planning is a good thing to do. Only about 30 years after electric utility industry created least cost planning, so it's about time that the transportation sector got on board with that idea. And the other thing that's glaring to me in this whole discussion is the utter lack of connectedness with climate change. I haven't read this entirely, but just scanning it, I don't see the words climate change even appear in the document. Except for one little place under general revenues, there's a carbon taxes, and that's the only place I can see where it even comes in. I think people are missing a really big connection there. They're also missing, if this goes to a public vote, there is a lot of people who understand climate change is a big issue, and that transportation is 40% of the emissions, and those two things need to be linked together. And if they want to have people pass this, then they need to link those two things. They're missing an entire segment of people that, and their motivation for wanting to move on this if they were to link those up. So, just a comment.
Yes, Paul, and well, let Paul and then Gary.
And if I may follow up on that, Counselor, it's really another legislative development. The Oregon Global Warming Commission issued a report today and basically said that while the state has been making progress towards its 2020, 2035, 2050 goals, that the progress in the transportation sector has been lagging and has put at risk meeting those goals, mainly putting the focus on the transportation sector, not stepping up enough, if you will. My words. They're testifying to the legislature. They have testified last week to the Land Conservation and Development Commission about this, the Global Warming Commission chair, and have said that the 2020 goals are already out of reach and that the transportation sector needs to do a lot more in order to even have a chance to reach the 2035 goals.
Yeah. I'm on the Oregon Global Warming Commission. We did approve that report yesterday, and it got published today. We've been on a steady downward trend of global warming or greenhouse gas emission reductions over the last several years until last year. In 2014 to 2015, saw an uptick, almost entirely related to transportation sector. They had the highest increase in emission increases. And as you said, because of that and the trend that then portends is we're not going to meet our 2020 goals or our 2035 goals with the existing and the planned actions that we're taking, and it takes bold leadership at the legislature, which I don't see happening, and at the governor's level to meet those goals. But other than that, it's just not gonna occur. But it is the transportation sector that's causing this, mostly the transportation sector that's causing this increase in uptick and lack of responsiveness in the transportation sector to the issue of climate change.
Yes, Gary.
Yeah, fortunately, Alan, it looks like that's all going to be taken care of by a bicycle excise tax.
Yeah, I saw that.
What is a bicycle excise tax? Is that like a luxury tax on buying a bike?
Essentially a sales tax,
Yeah.
but without calling it that in this state.
Yeah.
That goes through transportation funding.
Yes.
Because they
Great,
quote
great
unquote
idea.
use the roads.
That's a great idea, yeah.
Other comments? So, Paul, were you waiting to say something?
If we're still on the legislative update, I can add another topic, another quick report. Okay. So if you recall, 2 months ago, we had DLCD staff here to talk about the new GHG targets that were proposed. And they were scheduled to come back at your January meeting to give you details on those proposed targets and let you give input. Unfortunately, we canceled that meeting due to the weather. And LCDC did meet last week and did approve the new targets. So what you saw was essentially approved, mandatory for Portland, voluntary for every other MPO, not a significant change in the numbers. I won't go into those details. What I do want to add is that it was interesting, the public testimony at that LCDC public hearing before they approved it was split. And there were some significant bodies that testified in favor of making those targets mandatory for all areas of the state. Now, they did not do that, but there were some significant stakeholders that were asking for that. So I know there is concern about that in this area for some jurisdictions, and I just think we need to continue to monitor that also very closely.
So, go
Just
ahead.
out of curiosity, who are the stakeholders that were pushing for that?
Oregon EPA, 1,000 Friends of Oregon, and a few other groups. Those are the two main ones.
Thanks.
So is there any consideration for other things? I know I asked Bob Courtright, is it Bob, DLCD? He used to be on DLCD.
He used to.
At one point, because we're, and of course I have CLT written across my forehead, is that when you use alternatives, particularly to concrete, which is a greenhouse gas emitter, and you use wood instead, there's actually a formula that talks about how many cars you're actually taking off the road. Do they do any consideration for any other means to meet your greenhouse gas? Because there just are a lot of things that contribute to those factors, but they have actually linked it to cars on the road.
Yes. The new rules that LCDC approved last week provides a lot more flexibility and ability to claim credit for those things than the old rules did. For instance, in the Medford-Ashland area, they are reclaiming emissions from landfill and turning it into energy, which under the old rules they couldn't claim credit for, but now they can. So things like what you're talking about are now possible.
Great. Okay. I'm out.
Another good example, one of the things we do in Eugene is we do what's called low temperature paving. That's not the right term. But what it does is it uses a lower temperature to get to the same result, and we use less fossil fuels in order to heat up the asphalt to get there. But it's exactly the same result, but it's something like 50% reduction in the amount of greenhouse gases that are emitted per mile of new asphalt laid down. And exactly the same result, just a different way of doing it, smarter, more efficient, less costly way of doing the same exact result.
Well, and maybe that's something is to encourage, that if we have ways that we have formulas that actually can be measured as to what we can do as communities to actually address, and maybe it's greenhouse gas, because it's still, if you're looking at, all of the places that you create an issue, is what, is that we have this broad toolbox, but it translates into, accountability of some sort that we can go, oh, well, if we do this, we get this big a savings. If we do this, we get this big a saving. That would be very helpful. Other comments? Questions? Anything else between on the legislative? We're just getting started?
Yes. As I stated earlier, Paul went to Salem to the OTC meeting when they received their preliminary findings for their agency audit. And here
That would be great, because I love finding.
yeah, that's okay. Those are the notes he sent me from the meeting today. So I thought it would be interesting to know. Now, we have a copy of the preliminary draft report. It's 69 pages. I didn't print one out for anyone, but if you would like that, we're happy to send it out to this committee for your reading pleasure. But Paul will summarize it.
Is it available online?
It is, we can send a link.
Yeah, we can do that.
So, excuse my voice, this is the first draft of a process that's not yet complete. The management assessment had quite a delay in getting started. This was done very quickly, and they still have more to do. This was the first chance for the OTC and ODOT to see some results and to give input. Consultants still have more work to do in providing a final report. I really was typing these comments as I was listening to them, so I'll try and make sense of them. So the consultant analyzed ODOT in its management assessment and its business practices against both the public sector and comparable private sector entities, understanding that it operates as a large business in some respects. Overall, it said that ODOT was in the second quartile compared to the public sector, so above average, but with lots of room for improvement. The second quartile being down from the best. And it was, however, compared to the private sector, in the fourth quartile. It called out some specific things in again, the presentation today that they found issues with and they found positive things about. I mainly am going to talk about the issues here because I think that's what we might have the most interest in hearing in the time we have. They found that ODOT had issues with capital project delivery with both mega projects and small projects, that there were real issues with delivering the projects once the funding for projects was programmed. There was lack of clarity, even confusion, the consultant said, as to who was on point for delivering a project or a group of projects. And they found there were great opportunities for improvement in project governance and delivery. Related to that, in some respects, said that ODOT, and this is a quote, ODOT struggles with procurement and contract management. And they identified ODOT performance as, quote, below average. So procurement and contract management were areas for great improvement. They said that the role of ODOT in the state, both with respect to internal state government and other departments, as well as with respect to all of the local governments that it interacts with, was, quote, a major pain point, unquote, end quote. They said it was not well defined, understood, or leveraged what ODOT was doing and how it could work with partners both at the state government and throughout the state. They said that ODOT managers, okay, I'll start with this one. ODOT leadership has been in place for a very, very long time, and that has led to lots of informal processes, and thus not very explicit knowledge about ODOT processes, both internally and externally. They said, in fact, that historically, ODOT had been known as being too top-heavy and too directive at the management level, and that perhaps things had moved too far in the other direction to where there was a very good culture of cooperation, a very good culture of collaboration, but perhaps it had gone too far, and the report suggested that there were opportunities for moving back to the middle with more specific direction from the top while striving to retain the current collaborative culture. They talked about how, ODOT managers were over-leveraged, both with respect to, excessively leveraged, same thing, both with respect to managing too many people and too many projects. One of the findings was directed to the OTC. Quote, "The OTC tends to state a lot of things in generalities," end quote, leaving lots of room for uncertainty and vagueness, difficulty or latitude in implementation by ODOT, and other negative outcomes. The OTC needs to provide clearer direction to ODOT, especially when the OTC may not be 100% internally aligned on an issue. It's up to OTC to figure out how they become aligned and how they provide direction as a board to the department, not leaving that uncertainty to ODOT to try to figure out. They noted that the time frame, which I said was tight, for this assessment did not allow for a capabilities assessment of the department or its staff. So they had no judgment on whether they had the right mix of individual capabilities and talent in the department, and that should be looked into more. They said that ODOT needs to do a better job of establishing priorities. The department, quote, "can't have 50 priorities," and that the OTC and ODOT need to focus the agency with more specific detailed directions from the OTC. They need to improve their strategic alignment. And to this, they talked quite a bit about ODOT lacking a true business plan, that ODOT had a plethora of long-range plans and did pretty well in running the business day to day, although with room for improvement, but that there was no 3 to 5 year business plan. There was nothing that translated the long-range plans into what their strategy and their work was going to be for 3 to 5 years, and giving, again, direction to the department, to the staff, to all of us as partners. Let's see if there's anything else I want to mention here. Okay, so the 3 main areas for improvement, and this was in response to one of the OTC commissioners asking the consultant for this, and there's going to be a little repetition here. 3 main areas for improvement. Number 1, formalizing management practices without destroying the collaborative culture. Again, talked about how that maybe had gone too far, so they need to get a little bit more formal in their management practices. Number 2, cost efficiency operations on the operating side and to a lesser extent on the capital side. They noted there seemed to be quite a bit of inefficiency on the operations, cost-wise. And number 3, bridging the gap between the long-term plans and the current operations, that need for the 3 to 5 year business plan and what they're really trying to accomplish.
Wow, that was encouraging.
Did they mention they need to drop 10 pounds too?
No.
Okay.
So I actually was interviewed for 2 hours by the consultant, and once for an hour, 2 other times for a half hour. So 2 hours total. They've asked me to keep my powder dry because they may come back for additional interviews, so I won't comment too much. But I would say that Paul laid that out pretty well. I received the copy of the draft a couple days ago and went through it a little bit, and I think the one thing that several of us from on the local side did suggest that locally, the ODOT offices are actually, because we've been around for a while, so they're actually locally, the ODOT offices have been empowered. I think Franny's a good example. I think Jane Lee before was a good example. Bob Perry was not.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be frank.
Huge improvement.
Yeah, huge improvement. And so, but the overall strategic vision is just really out of line. And I'm glad you mentioned that about the OTC, because those of us who have been around remember Randy and Stuart, and that was, they ran this thing like an iron fist. And then what happened is they went to Kumbaya, and I think and so unfortunately, the OTC's there to give them direction, and at times I think the dog and the wagging of the tail-ish scenario, I think has been happening a little bit. And so I think you nailed it pretty well. That's what I kind of gathered, and I will say the questions by the consultants, they were not holding back. I mean, they were frank as frank could be, and they just wanted our direct honesty, and we gave them to them. And so it was pretty interesting. For a while, I was asking if, man, can I go get some ice water? I think I'm sweating here. So, because they were very, very direct. Don't let these little petite ladies come in and talk to you I thought she was gonna tear my head off for a second, but anyway, they were tough, but they wanted direct answers, and we gave them.
Who was the consultant?
They're out of Seattle, McKinsey.
McKinsey Group,
Yeah, out of Seattle. And I think that they do this with other,
they do it worldwide.
worldwide because I know they did the audit on Washington and the state of Washington and some others, so they're very experienced, but I was impressed, to be honest with you. They knew the questions they asked, and they, like I said, they were very, very frank. And I'll leave it at that, because I need to keep my powder dry. If they come back again.
So I know, we're getting right down to our last 5 minutes.
sorry.
We have, no, that's fine, because this is important. So what I was thinking is, I'm assuming there's next steps, or the next round of whatever is going to happen, that you'll keep us informed, because, you know, Franny not included here, is there has been, you know, situations, whatever, you know, we've all had those moments with ODOT where we go, what the heck? So keeping us informed, what's going on next?
Yes, absolutely. As the consultant develops a final report, as there's additional discussions at OTC and perhaps the ODOT policy group, which is Director Garrett's internal group, that we're able to be a part of, we will report on it. I will say also today that there were several members of the Joint Legislative Committee, senators and representatives, in the room at the OTC meeting today. They didn't offer comments. They were definitely listening. I was watching expressions on some of their faces. There were four people that testified during the public comment period on the draft report. 3 of them were consultants who praised the report and said, good, let's move ahead with the funding package. And then there was a 4th that was extremely critical of the report, and that testimony is available if you'd like to.
Yes, could we get that?
It was delivered, coincidentally, since you mentioned the name, it was delivered by Bob Courtwright, and it was written by his brother Joe Courtwright, and it was published yesterday on the internet, so it's available.
What was their criticism?
That the consultant had tried to assess how ODOT had done and had ignored many things like the Columbia River crossing and cost overruns on many other projects, and had simply not presented a true picture of how they had performed because they had ignored some of the biggest failures.
Oh.
So it was even more critical.
It was very critical, but again, just letting you
The
know that it's
report
out
doesn't
there.
talk about the Columbia River crossing?
Not at all.
Oh, boy.
You're kidding?
Wow.
No.
That's a $43 million.
Yeah. What elephant? Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So you'll keep us informed of what's going
Yes.
on, because that'll be important, because it'll determine maybe the future of ODOT. Okay, so I'm going to try and get us out of here, so I'm looking at which reports can be done in 30 seconds, or which ones can get moved, and so, Franny, I'm thinking, gosh, do you want to do it?
Sorry.
Well, I'm expecting that we'll have a lot of next steps from my manager down. My boss's boss down. We have a Lane Act meeting next Wednesday, February 8th. And one of the highlights is we're going to have a Cascade Rising debrief with Linda Cook, who came here. We're also going to be having a STIP open house from 4:30 to 5:15 to go over the list of projects that we're going to be funding in the 1821 STIP, and there'll be a chance to comment on those projects as well. I just wanted to mention really quick that we have been working with the Friends of Trees on tree planting along ODOT facilities in this area specifically. We were the pilot for Region 2 because they did some successful things in Region 1 along 205. And I was approached at one of those where they opened the streets up for bicycles, and Friends of Trees came to me, and I got Sunny to buy in on bringing them here. So we're having a planting at the Rose Garden in Eugene on the 18th at 9 to noon. If anybody's interested, let me know and I can give you more details. Daimler Chrysler has also been participating. You'll notice if you go to a football game and there's a touchdown that 6 trees are purchased for every point for both the Ducks and the Beavers. And it's a really good thing. Not very good this year.
We got a
Anyway.
growth, not a forest.
But you know, the Ducks put a lot of points on the board, they just gave up more.
The other thing is we have the Beltline project on I-5 going. They're building the sound walls. They're starting from Coburg Road and going east to I-5. We're also working on the wall. It's an MSE wall that will take the lane that peels off this Coburg Road and goes to northbound I-5. That project will be completed by the end of this year, 17. And everything's going well with that. That's all I have.
So I'll just say about the Main Street safety update, I know I've had this discussion with Gino and, how to coordinate our, and with Gary, is how to coordinate our corridor study along so it becomes one seamless project, because there's nothing like confusing every business owner out there as to what the heck we're trying to do, that we can, I'm sure, figure out how to do this in a seamless way that helps people stay on track of what we're trying to accomplish and not give them any more sleepless nights than necessary, and give the community the sense of we know what the heck we're doing and work together on it. So we're moving ahead as far as looking to Gino. Yep, we're moving ahead. Okay, good deal. Okay, so rail, I don't know if there's any rail that's anything.
No, not really, except to say that in the co-chair's budget, one of the cuts is cut funding for passenger and right road. So we'll keep an eye on that as well.
The same as it was last time.
Yeah.
Yes.
The OMPUC update, I don't know whether I want to take a minute. There's paperwork that went around the OMPUC at the meeting, which I remember, yes, it was all day in Salem. And then we went to the Transportation Policy Group right after we went to the OMPUC. And so from the paperwork, there were 3 priorities, not necessarily high, transit funding, active transportation, and leverage CMAQ that weren't prior, not necessarily in 1, 2, 3 order, but 3 priorities. And then there was a second page, which was additional priorities that not everyone could prioritize every single one of them, but we forwarded the group. Is that pretty much?
That's close. And again, OMPOC is working to give input. The legislative session was supposed to meet a week from tomorrow, but we have delayed that OMPOC meeting because the legislature has not moved far enough towards a bill or any concrete information yet.
So it's the additional points that everybody said could go forward, but it's the 3 priorities on the one that's the board meeting.
Yes.
That is the one that everyone could agree on would be our highest priorities. So that's the OMPUC update. Lane Act.
We heard that.
Yeah,
Already? Okay. And then anything for next steps? Otherwise, yes, Jim.
Chance, Patty.
Yeah, here's a chance.
I was just wondering at what point it would be appropriate to assess the change in leadership at the federal level with President-elect Trump talking about increased infrastructure and the concern I personally have over Elaine Chao being the Director of Transportation for the federal government. If she does for transportation what she did for labor, we could be in for a rough haul. And so I'd just like to know if we could get some kind of a feedback on what that future looks like for transportation and related fields.
Absolutely. I will say that within the past week and a half, we've already been monitoring that. It was actually one of the things that we were talking about some of the federal lobbyists with respect to whether to hold the OMPOC meeting next week, and they just have simply said there's no information yet at the federal level about specifics, or there's not enough to discuss yet, but we will keep monitoring it.
Good, thank you.
And that's what we got from, it's our Smith-Dawson lobbyist.
Yeah, and we've heard, we have our lobbyists looking at it.
And just very quickly, so I'm one of 100 commissioners nationwide that we have monthly conference calls, talk about national strategy for counties. What I will say is our association is pleased. So I'll just throw that at you. And our chief lobbyist, or excuse me, our chief staff, I don't remember what congressman he's staff for, but he did transportation. It was one of the Ds, and I can't remember, but he also stated that he was pleased with Elaine Chow. Part of it is because she knows the ropes in DC, and like some of the other selections, maybe not necessarily. So that's the National Association of Counties. That's where they are.
Yeah.
So I'll just throw that out there.
And I think importantly, we're not going to do our United Front trip in probably May, which
Yeah.
it's because of, trying to figure out where we're going to be, so.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll know something for a while yet. It would be a discussion point, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there anything else? We are meeting in Eugene next month, March 2nd, and if there's nothing else for the good of the order, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wow.